Chapter 22. In chapter 21, Jonas escapes on his bike. The plan was ruined because he had to take Gabriel, because they were going to release Gabriel, the small baby. So he ends up riding out on his bike. It's a lot of time, or not a lot of time, but time is passing, days and days and days. Jonas doesn't remember how many days he escaped. The community sent searchers on aeroplanes to find him. So Jonas has been hiding during the day and at night riding on his bike with Gabriel behind him. He's been using his memories to help Gabriel and him not be seen through the heat-seeking cameras that they use, and he's getting stronger because of all the bicycle riding. Chapter 22. Now the landscape was changing. It was a small change, hard to identify at first. The road was narrower, smaller, and bumpy, apparently no longer tended by road crews, so it's not a very nice road. It was harder suddenly to balance on the bike, as the front wheel wobbled over stones and ruts. One night Jonas fell when the bike jolted to a sudden stop against a big rock. He grabbed instinctively for Gabriel, and the new child, strapped tightly into the seat, was uninjured, only frightened and scared when the bike fell to the side. But Jonas's ankle was twisted, and his knees were scraped and raw, blood seeping through his torn trousers. Painfully, he righted himself and the bike and told Gabriel everything's going to be fine. Tentatively, he began to ride in daylight, not wanting to. He had forgotten the fear of the searchers, who seemed to have diminished into the past, who no longer were looking for him. But now there were new fears. The unfamiliar landscape held hidden, unknown perils, problems, things coming. Trees became more numerous, more trees, and the forests beside the road were dark and thick with mystery. They saw streams, little rivers, more frequently now, and stopped often to drink water. Jonas carefully washed his injured knees, wincing as he rubbed at the raw flesh. The constant ache of his swollen ankle was eased when he soaked it occasionally in the cold water that rushed through the roadside gullies, these small rivers. He was newly aware that Gabriel's safety depended entirely upon his own continued strength. They saw their first waterfall, Cascada, and for the first time, wildlife. "Plane! Plane!" Gabriel called, and Jonas turned and looked swiftly into the trees, though he had not seen planes in many days, and he did not hear an aircraft engine now. When he stopped the bicycle in the shrubs, in the bushes, and turned to Gabe, he saw the small chubby arm pointed toward the sky. Terrified, he looked up, but it was not a plane at all. Though he had never ever seen one before, he remembered it from his fading memories, for the giver had given them to him often. It was a bird. Soon there were many birds along the way, soaring overhead, calling. They saw deer, and once beside the road, looking at them curious and unafraid, a small reddish-brown creature with a thick tail, whose name Jonas did not know. He slowed the bike down, and they stared at one another until the creature turned away and disappeared into the trees, into the woods. All of it was new to him. After a life of sameness and predictability, where everything's the same, he was awed, surprised, amazed by the surprises that lay beyond each curve on the road. He slowed the bike again and again to look with wonder at wild flowers, to enjoy the throaty warble of a new bird nearby, or merely to watch the way wind shifted the leaves in the trees. During his 12 years in the community, he had never felt such a simple moment of exquisite happiness. So he's observing all of these wildlife things. Birds! What's a bird? He sees maybe a squirrel. He sees flowers with colors. And never in his life has he ever experienced those small moments of happiness. But there were desperate fears building in him now as well. The most relentless of his new fears was that they would starve, die of hunger. Now that they had left the cultivated fields behind them with food, it was almost impossible to find food. They finished the meager store of potatoes and carrots they had saved from the last agricultural area, and now they were always hungry. Jonas knelt by a stream and tried without success to catch a fish with his hands. Frustrated, he threw rocks into the river, knowing even as he did so that it was useless. Finally, in desperation, he fashioned a makeshift net, looping the hands of Gabriel's blankets around a curved stick. After countless tries, the net yielded 2 flopping silvery fish. Methodically, Jonas hacked them into pieces with a sharp rock and fed the shreds to himself and to Gabriel, so he catches a fish. They ate some berries and tried without success to catch a bird. At night, while Gabriel slept beside him, Jonas lay awake, tortured by hunger, and remembered his life in the community where meals were delivered to each house every day. So he's starting to realize some of the good things about sameness. He tried using the flagging power of his memory to recreate meals, and managed briefly tantalizing fragments, getting pieces, banquets with huge roasted meats, birthday parties with thick frosted cakes, and lush fruits picked and eaten, sun-warmed and dripping from trees. But when the memory glimpses subsided and left, he was left with the gnawing, painful emptiness. Jonas remembered suddenly and grimly the time in his childhood when he had been chastised for misusing a word. Chastised, being told off. The word had been starving. You have never been starving, he had been told. You will never be starving. Now he was. If he had stayed in the community, he would not be. It was as simple as that. Once he had yearned, wanted for choice, for choices. Then, when he had a choice, he made the wrong one, the choice to leave, and now he was starving. But if he had stayed, his thoughts continued. If he had stayed, he would have starved in other ways. He would have lived a life hungry for feelings, for colors, for love. And Gabriel? For Gabriel, there would not have been a life at all. So there would have not really been a choice. It became a struggle to ride his bicycle as Jonas weakened from lack of food, hunger, and realized at the same time that he was encountering something he had for a long time wanted to see. Hills. His sprained ankle throbbed, hurt, as he forced the pedal downward in an effort that was almost beyond him. And the weather was changing. It rained for 2 days. Jonas had never seen rain, though he had experienced it often from the memories. He had liked those rains, enjoyed the new feeling of it, but this was different. He and Gabriel became cold and wet, and it was hard to get dry, even when sunshine occasionally followed. Gabriel had not cried during the long, frightening journey. Now Gabriel cried. Now he did. He cried because he was hungry and cold and terribly weak. Jonas cried too, for the same reasons, and another reason as well. He cried, he wept because he was afraid now that he could not save Gabriel. He no longer cared about himself. That's the end of chapter 22. So Jonas, at the start of this chapter, experiences all these cool things, these birds, these new berries, these trees that he's never seen, these flowers he's never seen. But now he realizes the things he was running away from, where you didn't have a choice, when there's no color, he was starting to miss it because he doesn't have food now. He remembers how in the community you always had food, how he had said the word that he was starving once, but it was the wrong word to use because in the community, there are no mistakes. There's always food. You're never wet with rain. You're never cold. You're never tired. So he's starting to think about the things that he was running away from. But he also knows if he had stayed, he would have been hungry for color, hungry for love, and Gabriel would have been killed.